Hey everyone, welcome to our Maud Lewis LAU class, our Littles Art University. In this class, we are going to be learning all about Maud Lewis and her influence on Canadian folk art. We're going to be recreating one of her famous paintings as well. So follow along.
Maud Lewis lived in Digby, Nova Scotia, on the east coast of Canada. So she actually suffered from juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So that caused her joints in her fingers to become very painful and swell. So when she was 34, she applied to be a live-in housekeeper for a 40-year-old bachelor named Everett. So she got the job, and actually a couple weeks later, they ended up getting married. Maud started creating Christmas cards, and she would sell them with her husband Everett, who was a fisherman. So every time he was down at the dock, she would come and sell her handmade cards for only 25 cents each. Maud loved bright colors. You can tell in all of her paintings. They're nice and vibrant. She actually never mixed any colors. She would always just use the paint straight out of the tube. Maud liked to paint things that were dear to her. So all of the animals that were nearby when she was growing up, and a lot of her childhood memories, actually. Most of her paintings were actually quite small because she had such a hard time holding a paintbrush because of her arthritis. Maud eventually turned their house into her own art studio, and she painted on everything. She painted on their stove, on the stairs, on her baking sheets. It was honestly everywhere. And their house was actually a beautiful piece of art inside and out. You can still see Maud's house. It's actually located at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia in Halifax. You may actually recognize some of Maud's work as well if you received any Christmas cards in the mail. Her work was on the Canada stamp for the Christmas season of 2020. Maud's story is so lovely. She's such a wonderful folk artist, and it inspired a movie called Maudie after her life. We are ready to get started. So as you are working on your project and watching this video, please remember that you can pause, rewind, and fast forward as needed. You do not have to finish your project all in one sitting. If you work on a little bit one day and then more the next and then finish it off another day, that is completely fine. This is all at your own pace, so please don't feel rushed or pressure to finish it right away.
Okay, so for all of your stuff in your kit, you have a whole bunch of goodies to go along with this project. You have a canvas. Now this canvas is actually flat, which is kind of cool. But it also comes with a wooden frame, and you get to frame your art piece when you're all finished. You're going to come with a whole variety of paint as well. You're gonna have a foam brush, 3 smaller fine tip brushes, a pencil, a Sharpie, and some glue. So get all of your stuff out and we'll get ready to go. So for our very first step, we wanna work on our background. So we have to get our background done before we can add layers on top of it. So with your canvas, you're gonna just take out just the canvas piece, and the frame we're gonna set aside for later. Okay, so you're also going to grab your foam brush, your white, and your blue paint. So with your white paint, we actually just wanna give this one great big cover to make sure that we have a nice solid base. So using your foam brush and your paint, just take a little bit at a time. When we're painting, we wanna make sure that it goes on nice and flat, that there's not too many bumps or lumps in there at all, otherwise it's not going to dry in a nice uniform way. So nice flat layers of paint. If you need to do 2 layers, you're more than welcome to. If you use nice long strokes in the same direction and try to get all the paint out of that brush before you go in for more, that will help with your first coat on there. So I have a white coat all over my base here. If you want to do 2 coats, you're more than welcome. Just remember to make sure that every coat dries completely before you add the next one on. Okay, so keep that tip in mind. If you want to speed up the drying process, I like to use a hair dryer. It goes by really, really fast. Okay, so once your base white is dry completely dry to the touch, we're gonna go in with our blue now, and we're gonna add a portion of sky at the top. So I have washed my sponge brush, so same brush, I just washed it off first, so if you wanna go and do that. Now I'm going to put about a quarter. So if you did a middle line and then split your middle between the top and the bottom about to here, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections, I'm gonna go about 1/4 at the top of blue. And again, a little bit of paint and then nice long strokes all the way across. And I want to make sure that I'm using all of that paint in the brush before I go in with any more. So right to about there. Nice long back and forth strokes. Okay, so I have one coat on there. I'm going to dry it and do a second coat as well. Okay, so I put 2 coats of blue up in my sky here, and now it is all dry. So we want to make sure that every layer is completely dry before we move on. Otherwise, our paint is going to end up mixing and blending, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, so once we have our snow and our sky and it's completely dry, we're ready to move on to our next step. So for this, we're going to need, you're gonna need like a paper plate or somewhere that you can pour out some paint, a paper towel, as well as some water, because we wanna make sure that we're washing our brushes. So out of the 3 brushes that you do have, you want to pick out the one that is kind of the biggest and the longest. With this, and we're gonna start creating some tree trunks on the side, okay? So we're gonna just pick up just a little bit. I'm just gonna pick up just a little bit of brown on our tip. Now we don't want to scoop it like a spoon. We don't want to have that much on there. That is a lot, okay? So we want to kind of, when we're loading it, I like to spin and drag at the same time. So when I spin and drag, then I have like a nicely loaded brush all the way around, okay? So I'm gonna start over here. So we have a tree with a trunk that starts on the right-hand side. Now it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. So about the same distance here, I'm gonna start down here. So about a quarter of the way up, I'm going to start making a trunk. And we just want to pull all the way up. Right, just a nice straight swooping motion. And you'll notice when I push my brush down, I'm not fanning it out, I'm not squishing my bristles so that they wreck, but I'm pushing down and I'm pulling all the way up, which gives us a nice thick trunk. Okay, so we have a trunk on that side. Now we're going to put a trunk on the other side. Now this side, we want it to be a little bit skinnier, and I'm going to start all the way down at the bottom. And for this, I'm just going to pull, my tip of my brush is just touching, and I'm just going to pull almost up to the top as well. So we should have a thicker one on one side and a thinner one on the other. Actually, I'm going to bring this all the way up to the top. Okay, so for this side, I'm pushing my brush all the way down and pulling so it's nice and thick. This side, I'm just using the very, very tip, and it's just touching ever so slightly. Okay, so on this side, I'm going to have one branch coming out and over. Okay, but I still want to keep it up in the sky. I don't want it too low because I want our oxen to have enough room right in the middle. So this branch is just going to come just out and over just slightly. About there. Okay, now the other side, we have a few little branches as well. So I'm just going to load my brush, and we have one that comes down this way as well. Again, we're going to make this side a little bit smaller. So when you go down, just gently touch your brush and just pull ever so slightly. We just want to see where the branch would be. We're going to cover these with greenery afterwards. So then we're going to have another one coming off over this way and here
And then one coming maybe down this way a little bit. Okay, so I have my branches in there. And then on the other side, I'm gonna add a few smaller ones down here too. One here, a little one this way. Now these don't have to be perfect because they are being covered. Okay, so now we're gonna wait for this to dry and move on to our next step. All right, we have our base of our trees ready. Now we're going to layer on top of them, and they are nice and dry, so we're ready to go. So I've washed my brush, and I am ready to put on my greenery. So I'm gonna load my brush in the same manner. So I'm going to kind of rotate it as I go in, and I like to drag and pull at the same time. Okay, I'm not scooping to put a whole bunch on there like a spoon. I'm pulling and dragging with a little bit of a spin. Okay, so at the bottom on the left side here, we're going to put kind of like a bush on the bottom here. So to do this, to make the shape of the bush, what I like to do is I like to press and pull, and press, pull, press, pull, press, pull. Okay, and as you go down, they're gonna get bigger, and right, when you think of like a little bush or a tree, it's always smaller at the top and bigger and wider at the bottom. So that's what we're trying to do. So make a bigger one. So see how my brush is pushed? Now I'm just going to pull in the direction of the center. Okay, so push and pull, push and pull. We want to make sure that we're covering up that bark of the trunk as well. So maybe mine's going off the canvas, which is great. We're going to cover up all those bits. Maybe I go a little bit wider on this side. Right, but that technique of when you push down and then you pull is going to give you a good brush stroke to make those shapes. Okay, so I have a little bush on that side. Now we're gonna do a little one on this side. So this tree is further back a little bit. So we're just gonna do a little one here. So about here to here. So again, same direction. So press, pull, press, pull, press, pull. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for every branch that we have painted up here. We're doing the same motion as the bushes, and we're gonna start at the tip and pull up to the trunk. Start at the end and go into the trunk in the same motion. So press down and pull. And there we have our greenery of our trees all set. So again, we want this to dry before we move on. Great, you guys are doing awesome so far. So I made sure that my trees are nice and dry before we move on. And we're gonna take a pause from painting and we're gonna pull out our pencil. So I want us to sketch our cows or our oxen onto our canvas just so we know where everything is going before we start painting. Okay, so you should have a reference photo. Yours will probably be in color. So just so we know kind of where our parameters are, like where the feet and the body and the horns are going to be, just so we can place it a little bit easier on our canvas, okay? So I always like to start out knowing where my top and bottom and left and right are going to be, okay? So using your pencil,
we're not going to hold it like you do when you write your name. You're not going to hold it very, very hard. We want to use the end of the pencil near the eraser, and we want to hold it very, very lightly and make just a very, very light mark so that we're able to erase it afterwards. Okay, so I want my top of my horns are going to be a little bit up in the sky up here. They're going to overlap the blue and the green. So I want to make a little line up here so I know that that's how high they're going to go. Now down here, I am going to mark out where their hooves are going to go. So let's say about here. Okay, so there's still a bit of snow in front where they're going. Now, the cow on the left is about here. It's close to the tree, it's close to the branch. It's not too far over and it's not too far in because he does need to have room for his body. So we're gonna go about here. Okay, and then same with the other cow on the other side. So I'm gonna put him, he might overlap a little bit on mine. So I'm gonna say about here. Okay, now see, all of my pencil lines are nice and light. So when I need to go back in and erase it, it erases very easily. Okay, so let's mark out our top and our bottom and our left and our right where we need to keep everything within. Okay, so I have my square where I want my cows to fit. Now, if you have a different way that you want to do this, that's completely fine. I'm just doing the way that I like. You can follow along or you are kind of free to go at your own here as well. Okay, so as a reference, I'm gonna actually start on the left side here. So right here, I know that there's quite a big curve of this cow and I know that he's like right near the branch. So I'm gonna start here. Okay, and so I know it's gonna go up and down. Okay, so again, very lightly with my pencil, I'm sketching that edge of the cow. And then I know his leg comes down here. Okay, and then he has a back leg that comes down as well. Here, and then he has a hoof. Okay, and then this hoof, I'm gonna go about here. Okay, so I have the left side and his 2 feet. Okay, so now from here, I know he kind of curves. He has a curve that comes up. This is like the front of his like chest and stomach. Okay, and then from this curve here, I know he has another leg. And a hoof. And he has one in the back, so hiding back here. And the back legs are always shorter because they're farther away. Okay. Okay, so I have 2 front, 2 back. And then we're gonna go up this side now. So in your photo, you can see this side isn't as curvy. This side almost goes not straight up, but just a very, very slight curve up. And we also need to make room for our cow over on this side too. Okay, and any of these lines, if you don't like any of this, you're always free to go back in and erase everything. Okay, so you can sketch to your heart's delight and then go back in and erase as you need. Okay, so I have the body shape on the left. Now I'm gonna do the body shape on the right as well. So I know that there's a bit of a space between them. right, so far so good. We have the feet and the body. So I'm gonna go in and just erase a few things in here. I'm gonna erase this bottom line. And if you wanna shape your hooves a little bit better, go right ahead. Okay, so we have their bodies. Now we need to work on their heads. So this cow's head is going to be, so we know that the horns want to be all the way up here. I'm actually going to shorten these guys a little bit. We need a little bit more room here. Okay, if something's not looking quite right to you, you guys go right ahead and you adjust as you see fit. So I had to shrink mine to make sure that my heads fit a little bit better up here. Okay. So they have a big white spot on their tummy down here. I'm gonna kind of work in this spot just so I have a reference to know where their nose is. Okay, so there's the white spot on their tummy. So now we want to make sure that we have room for a bell, and then their nose is going to go right about here. All right, and then we round the edges for their nostrils. Has anybody ever seen like a cow, or more so a cow, kind of like a horse as well? They have quite big soft noses. Okay, so we want to make sure that we give them those nostrils. Okay, and then we're going to come up and angle out, a slight angle on both sides. Okay, so up and out, just a very slight angle. There we go. All right, so two heads. We want to make sure that we have ears on both sides. One ear, two ears, one ear. Okay, two ears, both sides. This is great so far. Okay. Now we want to work on their horns. So they have great big horns that are quite large. So on top of their heads, they're actually wearing like a headpiece for plowing. So just pretend that they're wearing like a headband for now. So they have like a rectangle between their ears here. So this is going to be their headpiece. And then behind that, they actually have a bit of a dome. So this isn't the top of their head. This is actually the back of where their yoke is. So they're yoked together when they're pulling. Okay, so now that we know where those pieces are, we know where their horns are going to be. So it's going to be above their ear, right? So right in here, right in this little space between the yoke and the ear, I'm going to make a great big horn. So to do that, again, I'm holding it nice and lightly, and I'm going to go up in a curve. Okay, almost like the shape of a crescent moon. Okay, so there's one horn. Again, I have my spot at the top where I kind of want them to meet up to, and then this side. So you can think of it like a skinny moon or like parentheses. There, so I have horns on this side, same thing on over here. So and the other side. There we go. All right, so we'll add a few more things in here. So we just have to finish off where the yoke is, and then we're ready to paint. We kind of have the rough idea of where everything needs to go. So the yoke in the back is joined straight across. So we want to join them right near their ears there. And then it's going to come down to about here. So this is going to end up being like a great big bar in the background. So just pretend that this follows all the way across. And we're going to have the end of it sticking out on this side. So think of it like a great big piece of wood. So if one ends there, we need to have one that ends over here. There. Okay, so once you have it roughly sketched out, erase everywhere that needs to be erased, and then we're ready to paint. All right, so we're ready to do our next layer of paint. So I'm going back into my brown first to get most of our cows painted. So you have two options here. So you can either use the brush that you were using before, the long round, or you can use the middle flat. I prefer this one for more detailed work like this. So I'm gonna choose my middle brush here, and I'm just going to take a very small amount of paint at a time. If it's too much in these small areas, it's going to be very difficult to work with. So I'm just taking a very, very small amount, and I'm going in where I need my brown to be. So the best way to do it, I like to do my edges first, like I am doing a coloring book or drawing. So I like to hold it nice and flat to the edge, and then I just use it like a pencil or a pen or a marker, and you just hold it and drag nice and straight. So I have a nice flat edge. And again, anything that is in front or we're covering, so that green bush or that green branch is gonna be behind him. So we're gonna paint right on top of that. Okay, so same on this side. I'm going to take it and just drag it like I am drawing with a pencil. Just using a small amount of paint at a time. Okay, and again, right around his stomach here where we have the white spot. And then this line comes down. All of his legs. Okay, so there's one side. We'll do the same on the other side for this guy. Okay, so now I have the outline of his body in brown. And then we have to outline, so his face is gonna be white, but we do need to add a little bit of brown everywhere else. So around the edge of his ears, so leave his ears white, but we're just gonna go on the outer edge of his ears. Okay, so the insides are white, the outsides are brown. I'm just using a tiny little bit of paint here, not much at all. Okay, so outside of ears are brown. Okay, and then the next part is actually this headband. Do you remember when we drew this headband on? So this is going to be brown. Follow those lines here, and then we're going to add a very small little square right below it. We didn't need to sketch this part in, we can just add it in right now. Just a little square, and I like to just touch and pull just a tiny little bit down. Just like that. Now that's it. So now we just need to go in and paint everything that we've drawn on. So around the face, I would follow as well, all the way around. Nice and flat so you have a nice sharp edge. If you touch your brush down and pull, you'll have a nice sharp edge, just like that. So some tricks when you're painting, use a little bit of paint at a time and go in the same direction. So pull, pull, and then I'd flip, use the other side of my brush, get all of the paint that is on there before I pick up any more. And again, nice flat paint. We're gonna do a second coat of this, but it's very important that it is flat so it dries nicely. Okay, so I finished the brown of my cows. Yours should look something similar to this. Now you can still see in here, like my edges aren't quite sharp enough. There's still a little bit of like lighter spots and darker spots. So it is dry. I gave it a quick blow dry, and I'm gonna do a second coat on here, and this should help and even everything out. All right, so there's 2 coats on my cows. They're looking awesome. Yours should be looking awesome too. So we're ready for our next spot. So this is almost like a paint by numbers that we made ourselves. So the next spot we're gonna do is we're gonna do our red. So because this is a little bit more detailed and close to another color, I'm gonna use my small brush to outline, and then you can fill it in with your medium-sized brush. So for the red pieces, I'm gonna work from left to right because I'm right-handed. So as I go, I'm not going to smush any other colors, or if you're left-handed, maybe you work on this side and go across this way. Okay, so I'm going to start over here and just outline where I know my red is going to go. So I see my pencil marks, and I'm going to just cover those up. And when I'm right next to the ear, I need to be nice and gentle. I'm only using the very, very tip of the smallest brush I have, just to make sure that I'm not overlapping. We want to make sure that everything is nice and neat, right? Maud never mixed colors, so we don't want our colors to mix as well. Okay, so we want our left side of our yoke, then we're going to do the top part up here, so this kind of dome shape. Up here, I'm following again my pencil line. Okay. Tiny little bit, the middle here. Okay, the dome on this side over here. And then the last piece right on this side. Okay, so I've outlined all of my red pieces. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and you may have noticed that I was resting my hand right on there so that I'm very, very steady when I'm using my brush. If you rest your hand while you're using it, that's going to help you have nice straight lines. Also, if I'm resting my hand on here, this paint is necessary that it is dry, otherwise I'm going to smear it and get it everywhere. So every single color, every single layer must be dry before you move on. Okay, so once this is done, I'm gonna fill it in, and again, let it dry, and then do 2 coats. All right, there's coat 1. And remember, to speed up your dry time, I like to use a hair dryer. So I've already dried this nice and fast, and I'm on to my second coat. All right, 2 coats of red, on to the next color. So we're going to use just a small amount of gray. We need to do the horns and his hooves, and then we have his nostrils and just like a tiny little shadow underneath here. So use whichever brush that you prefer. Again, with the smaller details, I like the tiny one. Otherwise, the medium size, the flat one, works really, really well as well. So again, we're doing the horns, the hooves, and then I'm gonna show you the 2 other tricks that we're doing in between. So again, this is perfectly dry, so I can rest my hand on there. Okay, so we have the horns and the hooves all done. We have a couple other little spots that we need to do as well. So right underneath here, we're gonna add a little flick of gray, as it would be like a shadow underneath their belly. So using our middle-sized brush, the flat one, I'm just taking a little bit of gray on there. And what I'm gonna do is it's a similar motion to what I was doing with our trees. I'm going to place it down and kind of drag and flick up. Okay, so I'm gonna place it right down at the bottom, drag, and as I'm dragging, I'm going to like turn my brush and flick it so it has a skinnier line going up the side. Okay, and we're gonna do it to both of these. So flat, drag, and flick it up. There we go. All right, and then the other thing we need to add is our little nostrils on our cows. So using your smallest brush, okay, we're gonna take just a little bit of that gray, and we have to it's almost like we're making little commas. Okay, so it's the same motion that we just did with just a very, very small amount of paint. And right where the nostril is gonna be on this side, I'm going to flick it to my left, and then on the right-hand side, I'm going to flick it to my right. So I'll show you. So I'm just gonna place it straight down, touch, and then I'm going to flick and curve. So there's a nostril, and then on this side, same thing, touch, and flick and curve the opposite direction. Now he's got two little nostrils. And the same on our other cow over here. Touch and flick, touch and flick. There we go. So that is all of our gray. Make sure that this is dry and then go ahead and do your second coat. Excellent job, everyone. So our gray paint is now dry and we're ready to move on. So now I'm gonna take my white paint. So this same paint that I painted my very base coat, you should have a lot left over. I'm going to take my large brush, and we're going to add a little bit of white onto our cow's legs, just so they pop a little bit more. Okay, so this is exactly what Maud's painting looks like. So we're just gonna copy her style. So the same way that we did our trees prior, we're going to do a similar motion on our feet here. Okay, so I'm going to press my brush right in the middle of his leg and just drag it up about halfway. Okay, I'm going to do that on all of the legs. Just give some different texture and color in the fur. All right, so I'm gonna move on to yellow now. We have a few really pretty finer details that we're going to be adding. So it's like they have little gold tips on their horns, and they have like a chain dangling off of their headpiece, and they have a great big bell hanging around their neck. So we're gonna use our smallest brush. So this is a nice fine detail one because we just want to have the smallest amount of yellow on here. Now, when you're doing this, think of what it would be like for Maud with her very, very badly arthritic hands, how she would do such detailed work when it was very, very hard for her to even hold a paintbrush. So just keep that in mind when we're working on this part. So using my fine brush, I'm going to go in, always using just a little bit. You can always add more paint, but you can't take it off. All right, so I'm going to add on just the tip of our horn here, just a small little bit of yellow. So it's like they're very, very fancy cows, very fancy oxen, and have gold tips on their horn. All right, so as that's drying, I'm gonna move down here and I'm going to do a small little loop. So it looks almost like it's bedazzled or jewels, a small little circle right on the very end of their headpiece. So now we're going to add some polka dots. So it's going to be right on top of their headpiece, almost like it's studded. So instead of using the tip of our brush, we're actually going to use the back. And this gives a great polka dot, okay? So I'm going to dip it straight in, so straight up and down. All right. There's paint on the back. And I'm gently, just gently touching where I want it to go. I'm not pressing hard, I'm just very delicately touching where I want my polka dots to go. I can usually get about 4, and then I have to go back in and go straight up and down, and then you have to do it again. Again, just don't press too hard, and the harder you press, the bigger the polka dots. Okay. Straight up and down, and we're gonna add a few polka dots right even into this part that dangles down. And you're gonna do that on both sides. Once we have our polka dots on our headpiece done, we're going to put a bell right underneath here. So going back in with our bristles, we just need to make the shape of a bell. So it's going to be smaller at the top and then a bit wider at the bottom with a curved edge. Okay, so we don't want it to look too boxy. We want it to have a nice soft edge. And then we're gonna fill that in. And then we're gonna do that on both sides. All right, so our bell shape is on there now. Now I'm gonna add a chain around from ear all the way down and then back up again to the ear. So it looks like it's sitting on their neck. So for this, we're using our same polka dot technique. We're gonna use our back, pick up our paint straight up and down. You're not mixing, straight up and down. And I'm going to start up near his ear and make polka dots all the way along till it connects like a chain. And then do that on both sides. Okay, so our chain is done, but our bell also needs a little dot right at the bottom where it's going to make noise. So we're gonna do one dot right below our bell, just like that. And that is all of our yellow. So make sure this dries, and the only places that you're going to need a second coat are going to be on their horns and on their bell. You can leave all of the polka dots. Awesome, you guys. This is our last color and our last couple steps to finish off our painting. So the last little bit we have is going to be with our black paint and our finest tip brush. So we have some details that we need to add on there as well. So I'm gonna give you 2 different options. So I'm going to do one with paint, and then I'm gonna do the other with Sharpie, and then this way you can choose which way you prefer, okay? So if you want to be true to how Maud did her art, you're going to use paint. If you find this part too tricky, go ahead and use the Sharpie, okay? So with my finest tip brush, I am taking the smallest amount of black paint, and I'm going to add 2 little lines on the horns. Just like that, easy peasy. All right, and then the next part are the eyes. So this is where it becomes a little bit tricky, painting with such fine detail. So if you're going to go ahead with the paint, I would hope that you would choose this direction, just to try it and see. You can always practice on a piece of paper first before you paint directly onto your canvas if you want to try it this way. So with the smallest amount of paint, we're going to create an eye. So the eye shapes are kind of like ovals or footballs or almonds, okay? So for this, we're going to do an upper. Again, do your best job, smallest, thinnest line. So you're barely touching your brush to the canvas. It's just like a feather floating right on top of it. So you have a curved upper, and then we're going to do a curved lower going the other direction. Right, I can always go back in with more paint, but I can't take it off. Okay, so there's my upper and my lower. And we're going to do that on both sides. You're going to need lots and lots of patience for this part. Some tricks I can tell you is if you rest your hand on your canvas so it doesn't move and you're just using your fingers to move your brush, that is definitely helpful. It definitely stabilizes where you're putting your paint. Okay, so we have our shapes of our eyes. Now we need to create the eyes inside. So I'm going to make like almost like half a circle in here. I'm just going to fill in that part just like that. So it's like a half circle from the top, half a circle, back up to the top. So that part we want to be black. That's the iris. Okay, so far so good. Now, if you've ever seen a cow up close, they have big, beautiful eyelashes. Okay, so same thing, we need the smallest amount. We're going to do upper eyelashes and lower eyelashes. So when you're doing this, they're going to flare out at an angle. Okay, so I'm flaring this one off this way, and then the bottom is going to come this direction. Okay, and when I'm doing it, I'm again, like a feather, barely touching, and just tiny, tiny little flicks. Tiny little flicks. Okay, and then same the other on the bottom, but we're just gonna go the opposite direction down this way. There we go, got some eyelashes. We do the other side as well. Just like a feather. All right, so there's my cow's eyes. The last little bit we're going to put some lines on their hooves so you can see a divide right down the middle. So with your black paint and your tiny brush, you're gonna go straight in the middle and make a straight line all the way down. The finer the line, the better. It's going to look much nicer having a nice thin line than a thicker line. All right, so that is my cow with paint. I will also show you with Sharpie. So again, if you're going to do the paint option, practice on some paper before you go ahead and do this. Get to know your brush and the bristles and the amount of pressure that you need to put down before going ahead. All right, so if you feel more comfortable with the Sharpie, not a problem. So we're just gonna go in the same direction. It's very, very important that your paint is all dry on here before you go ahead. Sharpies do not like wet paint. They will not work. You're just going to use it just like you're drawing or coloring. So this is a fine tip Sharpie. If you use the very, very tip of it, it will give you a nice point, which is going to be helpful when we do our eyes. So for the eyes, it's the exact same shape, the exact same way of doing it, but instead of using the brush, we're just using our Sharpie. So if I just use the very, very tip, I can get a nice crisp line. There's my top, there's my bottom. I'm going to create like a U shape. All right, there's my irises, eyelashes, little flicks. So just touch and flick. Touch and flick. Touch and flick. There we go. There's my eyes on that side. And again with our hooves down here, just a straight line down. So congratulations, you guys, you finished it. So our painting portion of this project is finished. You did a great job. I cannot wait to see them. And what's awesome is right here in this corner, there's a perfect little spot to sign your artist name. So go ahead and do that. The very last step is we want to frame our work, okay? So with our frame, you are welcome to absolutely paint this any colors that you were provided in your kit. So remember doing one coat, let it dry. You can flip it, do another coat, let it dry. But I'm just gonna keep mine wooden. I like the look of it, so I'm gonna keep mine like that. All right, so there's a bit of a lip, an inset. That's where our canvas is going to sit. So we want that inset facing up, okay? You should also be given some E6000 glue. And with this, we're going to adhere our canvas into our frame. All right, with our E6000 glue, we are going to go on the inside lip of our frame, and I just like to add little dots of glue all the way around. If this gets on your fingers, that's okay, it does wash off. It will need about half an hour to adhere to your canvas. So once you put your canvas on, we want to make sure that it doesn't move and it sits nice and still. Okay, so I have all my glue on there. And with my canvas, I'm just going to slide that right into that inset. Put it down. Okay, and then I'm gonna give it a push and a wiggle just to make sure it's all nice and centered. All right. So that's pressed down. So now I'm gonna leave it for about half an hour to make sure that it sticks. Thank you so much for following along and learning about Maud Lewis with me. I hope you enjoyed your project as much as I did. So please follow us on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. And when you're done your project, please tag us on Instagram at Pinovate and DIY Delivery. We would love to see how your art turned out. Thank you so much. See you later.